The pine tree smelled wrong on a space station. That was the first thing Dara Holt noticed when Wren dragged it through the cargo bay doors. It smelled like soil and cold air and something that had no business being 60,000 kilometers above any planet. It smelled like Earth. Wren sat in the corner of the communal hall, stepped back, and grinned like he had just won something. Dara crossed her arms. "You carried a tree. Across 4 cargo transfers." "It's December," Wren said, as if that explained everything that IT did, actually. At least to her. Station varies. 9 was not built for comfort. It was built for function. The walls were gray alloy. The floors were sealed composite. The lighting was always slightly too bright and slightly too cold. 31 aliens lived and worked here alongside 11 humans, and most of the time everyone got along fine by simply not asking too many questions about each other. The tree changed that, why the time Wren had set up the stand and strung the first line of lights, 3 alien crew members had stopped in the doorway. 2 Velothi workers, their hard-shelled bodies tilted at curious angles. And Ro was a Velothi diplomat, tall, precise, and convinced that most human behavior could be explained by insufficient education. He looked at the tree, then at Wren, then at Dara. "You have brought a dead plant into the common area," he said. "It's a Christmas tree," Dara said. "It is a severed conifer. It is dying." "You are decorating a dying plant." "Yes." Ro waited for more. Dara did not offer more. Sewell drifted in from the corridor. Sewell was Scythian, something like a pale jellyfish that had learned to walk upright. It moved slowly and recorded everything. 11 months of observing humans had filled over 400 log entries. It pulsed softly at the tree. "Organic matter," it said. "Cut from root system. No longer capable of nutrient absorption. Estimated remaining structural integrity, 9 to 14 days. "Thank you, Sewell," Dara said. "You're celebrating its death." Ro asked. Dara turned to face him fully. "We are celebrating the fact that something kept standing when it had every reason to stop." Ro stared at her. "That is not a logical framework for a holiday." "No," she agreed. "It is a human one." Ro left. The 2 Velothi workers stayed a little longer, then wandered off. Sewell remained near the doorway, pulsing quietly, making notes. Wren hung a silver ornament and stood back to look at it. "Think they'll come around?" Dara picked up a string of gold beads from a box on the floor. "They always do. Eventually." She did not know a transport shuttle called the Marin's Run was 14 hours out with a cracked fuel coupling and 11 children aboard. She found out at 0300 when the distress ping woke her. The shuttle limped into docking bay 4 just after dawn. Director Navin met it at the dock with Dara beside him. Navin was Auric, a species with wide flat eyes and a crest of gray feathers that rose and fell with his mood. Right now the crest was flat. "Engine failure on a relocation transport," he said. "Repair estimate is 5 to 7 days. We do not have child accommodation on this station." "We have empty crew quarters," Dara said. "We have empty crew quarters that are not suitable for human children. I'll make them suitable." Navin's crest rose slightly. He had learned, in 8 months of working with Dara, that this tone meant the conversation was over. The children came down the ramp in a quiet line. 11 of them, ranging from 6 to 12 years old. They wore standard-issue gray jumpsuits of the Colonial Relocation Program. No bags beyond small personal pouches. No parents, because that was the whole reason they were on this shuttle in the first place. They looked at the station walls. They looked at Navin, who was large and feathered and not human. 2 younger ones moved closer to the girl at the front of the line. The girl did not flinch. She looked at Navin with calm, dark eyes and said, "How long?" 5 to 7 days, Navin said, caught slightly off guard by her directness. She nodded. "Okay." Her name was Nina. Dara learned that in the first 5 minutes. Nina was 12, had been in the relocation system for 3 years, and had the stillness of a child who learned that being loud changed nothing. Dara walked them through the main corridor toward the temporary quarters. They passed the communal hall. Nina stopped. The others bumped gently into each other behind her. The tree stood in the corner, lit softly, with 2 ornaments on it and a string of gold beads not yet fully placed. It was bare and lopsided and small. The pine smell drifted into the corridor. Nina stood in the doorway for a long time. Then her breath caught. Not a cry, not a sound, really. Just a small fracture in something she had been holding together for a long time. They put up a tree, she said. Very quiet. Not to anyone. Rin, coming from the other direction with a box of ornaments, heard it. He looked at Dara. Dara said nothing. She let the girl have the moment. Behind Nina, a small boy named Benny looked at the tree. He never spoke, but he reached into his pouch, pulled out a pencil stub, and held it tight in his fist. The tree lights blinked once, slow and gold. Down the corridor, Ro watched from the intersection. He said nothing. He turned and walked away. But not fast. Nobody told the children to get up early. They just did not be why the time Dara checked on the temporary quarters at 0600, 3 beds were already empty. She followed the faint sound of movement down the corridor and found them in the communal hall, gathered around the tree in the low morning light, working quietly. Lola, 9 years old and entirely unafraid of anything, was folding a strip of silver food packet foil into a tiny shape. Colt, 6, sat beside her, carefully tearing thin strips from the edge of a meal wrapper. Benny stood closest to the tree, pencil in hand, drawing something small on a square of paper he had torn from the back of a station instruction card. They were not playing. They were working. There was a difference, and Dara could see it clearly. This was serious to them. Ren came up beside her in the doorway. They watched together without speaking. By 0700, all 11 children were there. The tree was still mostly bare, but slowly, carefully, it was getting less bare. Foil shapes, folded paper, a loop of braided wire, a hand-drawn star that Benny had cut out and pressed flat, and no one had told him to do this. No one had given instructions or supplies. They had looked at what was available and decided it was enough. Ro arrived at 0740 for his scheduled access to the communication terminal on the far wall. He stopped in the entrance and looked at the children spread across the floor. He looked at Dara. "They are still here," he said. "Engine is still broken," she said. He walked carefully around the edge of the room, keeping to the wall. Lola looked up at him without concern. "Do you want to make one?" she asked, holding up her foil shape. Ro stopped. "I did not participate in decorative rituals." "It's not a ritual," Lola said. "It's just making something for the tree." "Yeah, which is a dying plant." Lola tilted her head. "So?" Ro had no answer for that. He went to the terminal. Sewell arrived 20 minutes later and began its daily log. Then Lola approached it with a square of foil and a look of complete confidence. "I'll teach you," Lola said. "It's easy. You just fold it like this." Sewell looked at the foil. It said, "My limb structure may not try," Lola said. Sewell tried. The fold was terrible. Asymmetrical, crumpled at one corner, vaguely triangular in a way that suggested no particular shape. Lola examined it with great seriousness. "That's a good one," she said, and went to hang it on the tree. Sewell's bioluminescence pulsed in a slow, pale wave across its body. It had not expected that. It stood very still, then added to its log. "Human child Lola evaluated my output as successful despite objective failure. Reason unclear. Recording for further study. By midday, alien crew members had begun drifting past the doorway. Not entering, just pausing, looking. Oris was one of them. He was Velothi, older than Ro, broader, quieter. He had workstation maintenance for 6 years and kept to himself. He stopped at the door and watched for a while, then moved on. But he came back twice. The third time, Benny noticed him. Benny did not wave or speak. He simply held up the small drawing he had just finished and looked at Oris steadily, the way children sometimes look at people who seem lonely without knowing why. Oris looked at the drawing. It was the tree. Simple lines, careful shading, a star at the top. Benny held it out toward him. Oris did not come into the room. But after a long pause, he reached across the threshold and took it. Then he walked away without a word. That evening, Director Navin found Dara in the mess hall. "The children cannot remain in the communal area indefinitely," he said. "I have received complaints. The emotional environment is described as disruptive." "Disruptive how?" Dara asked. "The crew is having difficulty focusing." "On what?" "On not watching the children." Dara looked at him. That does not sound like a complaint. That sounds like curiosity. Naven was quiet. One more day, Dara said. Just let them have the tree for one more day. After a long pause, Naven's crest settled. One more day, he said, and left. Dara went back to the communal hall. The lights were dimmed. The children were settled in a loose circle under the tree, not talking much, just close together. Colt had fallen asleep against Nina's arm. Benny was still drawing. The tree stood above them, imperfect and half-decorated, with foil shapes and paper cutouts, and one badly folded Scythian ornament near the bottom branch. Somewhere in the maintenance corridor, Ora sat with a drawing of a tree in his hands and did not put it down. Ren turned off the main lights from the panel by the door, leaving only the small string of gold bulbs. The room went warm and quiet. None of the children moved. They were already home. On the third day, Colt stopped eating, not completely. He took the food tray when Dara offered it and picked at the edges. But he did not really eat, and he did not really talk, and he sat a little apart from the others in a way that made the older kids glance at him without saying anything. Dara knew why. She had read his file. He was 6 years old and had been told, before boarding the shuttle, that a family on the colony world was considering him. A real consideration, not just a flag in the system. Someone who had looked at his file and said, yes, maybe him. And now he was 5 days delayed, possibly more, and 6-year-olds do not understand that waiting is not the same as losing. She was trying to figure out what to say to him when Ro appeared in the doorway of the hall again. He had been appearing in doorways a lot. He would stand, make some quiet observation, and leave. Dara had stopped commenting on it. This time he looked at Colt, then at Dara. The small one, he said. He is diminished. He's worried about something, Dara said. What is he worried about? That someone is going to stop waiting for him. Ro processed that. His mandibles moved slightly, which on a Velothi was not quite a frown, but was something in that direction. He looked at Colt again. Then he left. Director Naven found Dara an hour later. He stood beside her in the doorway and watched the children for a while. Then he said, what is the purpose of the tree? It was not quite a question, more like something he had been carrying around and finally decided to put down. Dara thought about it. There's a point in our year, she said, when the nights get very long and very cold. Everything outside goes dark and quiet. For a long time, people were afraid of that. They thought the light might not come back. Naven's crest rose slightly. So they started cutting branches, Dara said, bringing green things inside, things that were still alive even in the cold. And they put lights on them and gathered around them and said, we are still here. The dark is not the end. We will make our own light until the real one comes back. Naven looked at the tree. That is a very long explanation for decorating a dead plant. Yes, Dara said. It is. After a pause, he said, my species marks the cold season also. We do not bring trees inside. We go underground and wait. That works too, Dara said. But it's lonelier. Naven did not answer. But he stood there a while longer before he left. In the afternoon, Sewell approached Dara with its recorder active. The children arrived with almost nothing, it said. Yet they decorated the tree with what they had. They did not ask for resources. They used what was there. A pause. Why? Because the tree needed it more than they did, Dara said. The tree is not aware of need. No, Dara said. But they are. Sewell recorded this and left .by late afternoon. Something had quietly shifted. Oris had come in and sat against the far wall for almost an hour, not talking to anyone, just present. 2 Velothi workers sat near the corridor entrance watching the children play a card game. Even Fess, the station cook, had found a reason to pass through. Nobody explained it. Nobody organized it. And then Colt had his moment. It happened quietly, the way hard moments do. He looked at the tree, and something in his face shifted, and he pressed his hands over his eyes and went very still. Nina saw it first. She moved to him without a word and put her arm around him, and he leaned into her and finally made a sound. Small, muffled, and entirely honest. The room did not fill with rushed comfort. The children simply adjusted, moved a little closer, and kept being near him. That was all. Ro was in the doorway. He stood there and watched Nina hold Colt, and the children close around them, and the tree above all of it with its gold lights. and his mandibles did not move at all for a very long time. Then he walked to his quarters. Dara did not follow. She found out later, from Sewell, that Roe had spent 3 hours in the station archive that night, reading human records, orphan statistics, colonial relocation protocols, foster family matching processes. At midnight, the station was quiet. The children slept near the tree. The gold lights stayed on. Nobody had turned them off. Down on the floor beside the tree, Benny had left a new drawing. Not the tree this time. The room. Full of people with small dots of light everywhere. He had drawn aliens in it too. Roe came to the hall the next morning before anyone else was awake. Not to use the terminal. Not to observe. He simply stood in front of the tree for a long time, alone, in the low light before the station day began. Dara saw him from the corridor. She did not go in. She stood back and let him have whatever he was working through. When Nina came in 20 minutes later, still half asleep, she stopped short at the sight of him. Then she walked to her usual spot near the base of the tree and sat down. She did not ask what he was doing there. He did not explain. They sat in silence for a while. Then Rose said, without turning, "What does it mean to you?" "The tree. Not to humans. To you." Nina was quiet for a moment. She pulled her knees up and looked at the branches. "My mom used to say the tree remembers the forest even after it's cut," she said. "It still smells like outside. It still stands up straight. It does not know it is supposed to be sad about what happened to it." Roe was still for a long time. "You were 8 when she told you that?" he asked. Nina looked at him. "How did you know that?" "I did not. I assumed." He paused. "It is the most honest philosophy I have heard on this station. And I have been here 2 years. Nina did not smile exactly, but something in her face settled. "Do you want to put something on it?" she asked. "I have nothing to offer." She reached into the small pile of leftover materials beside her and held out a strip of foil. Ro looked at it for a moment. Then he took it. He folded it once, not into any shape, just a fold, and reached up and pressed it onto a branch. It hung there crooked and simple. He did not fix it. By midday, word had moved through the station the way things move in small enclosed spaces, without anyone exactly spreading it, but somehow everyone knowing. The children were leaving in 2 days. The engine repair was nearly done. The mood in the hall shifted. Not to sadness exactly, more like the feeling before rain, when everything is still but charged. Oris appeared in the doorway in the early afternoon. He was holding something, a small flat case, the kind used to store personal data cards. He came in this time, all the way in, and walked to where Benny sat drawing near the tree. He crouched down, which for a broad velothi took some effort, and he opened the case. Inside, pressed flat and sealed behind a piece of station-grade, transparent material, was Benny's drawing of the tree. He had framed it. Oris held it out. Benny looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Oris. Then he reached into his pouch and took out a new drawing he had been working on that morning and handed it over. It was a picture of Oris. It was a good likeness. Oris sat with it in both hands and did not speak. His secondary membranes, which velothi used to filter bright light, were doing something they were not designed to do. Dara turned away and looked at the wall for a moment. After that, something broke open. Not loudly, quietly, the way a window opens and changes the whole air of a room. A velothi technician named Brass, who had been lurking near the doorway for 2 days, came in and sat on the floor. Just sat. A young Scythian crew member brought a section of colored wire mesh from the repair bay and asked Lola if it could be used. Lola said yes and immediately started weaving it into something. Fess arrived with a container of something warm from the galley, set it near the children without a word, and left. The tree accumulated. More things appeared on it. A small circuit piece for Brass. A thin strip of woven fiber from the Scythian crew member. A folded data card from one of the velothi workers. None of them said anything about it. They just added their things and stepped back. Ro watched from across the room. At some point, Lola climbed onto a chair to hang the wire mesh piece near the top. It caught the light and scattered it across the wall in small broken pieces. Everyone in the room went quiet for a second. "That's the best part," Lola said, very matter-of-fact, and climbed back down. That evening, Navin sent a message to all station staff. He had never done this before for a human occasion. The message was short. It said that the station would observe what he was calling an informal gathering the following evening, the last night before the children's departure. Attendance was not required. Every alien on the station showed up. Dara found out later that Sewell had gone to Naven and said 3 sentences. She asked Sewell what they were. Sewell played back the recording. The 3 sentences were, "The children will leave in 31 hours. After that, the station will return to its previous state. I do not believe anyone here wants that to happen without first acknowledging what occurred." Dara read it twice. Then she went to find Ren and asked him to please get the good lights out of storage, the bright ones they had saved, because tomorrow night was going to need them. The last night arrived the way good things do, quietly, without announcement, and before anyone felt ready for it. Ren had strung the extra lights along the upper wall of the hall, the warm kind, and the room looked entirely different. Softer, fuller, like it had been holding its breath and finally let go. The children were already there when the alien crew began to arrive. They came in 1s and 2s, pausing at the doorway the way they had been doing all week, then stepping through. Oris came early and took his spot against the wall. Sewell drifted to its usual corner. Brass and the young Scythian worker sat together on the floor near the children without being asked. Naven arrived last. He stood near the back and folded his wings flat, which for an Auric was the posture of genuine attention. Dara had asked each person to bring one thing, not a decoration, something that meant warmth or home to them. She had expected most to bring nothing, or to bring something small and awkward. She had been wrong. Oris brought a piece of old hull plating from his first posting, worn smooth at the edges from years of handling. He said it was the wall of the first room that was ever his. The young Scythian worker brought a recorded sound, 3 seconds of ocean from its home world, played softly from a small device. Several people closed their eyes when it played. Brass brought a photograph, printed on actual paper, of 3 Velothi standing in front of a building. He said it was his family. He did not say more. Fess brought food. Real food, not station rations. Something it had made from a recipe it had not used in 7 years. Ro brought a piece of folded paper. When Dara asked what it was, he said it was the first equation he ever solved correctly. He was 9 years old when he solved it. He had kept it since then. He walked to the tree and pressed it onto a branch near the middle. Nina watched him do it. Then she stood up, took it back off, and folded it into a small, careful shape. She hung it back in the same spot. Ro looked at it. "I do not know what shape that is," he said. "It's a star," Nina said. "Kind of." Ro looked at it again. "It is not geometrically a star." "No," Nina agreed. "But it has the right idea." Ro sat down on the floor. He had never sat on the floor of the communal hall before. Then Dara said she wanted to try something. She said it was something the children had started doing on their own, and she thought everyone might want to join. She said it was simple. Each person would say one good thing that had happened this year. One real thing. Small is fine. It did not have to be large. Colt went first because Dara asked him to, and because she knew what he would say. He said, "I found out someone was waiting for me." The room was very quiet. The children went through their things one by one. A kind word remembered. A meal that tasted right. A morning that felt safe. Small things, said plainly, with the particular seriousness of children who had learned not to take small things for granted. Then Lola looked at Sewell. Sewell made a sound. Then it said, carefully, "A child taught me to make something with my hands." The result was not correct. She said it was good anyway. I had not experienced that before. A pause. It was good. Brass said the photograph on the tree was the first time his family had been in the same room in 4 years, and the picture had been taken the day they finally were. Oris said, in a very low voice, that a boy had given him something that no one had ever given him before. He did not say what it was. He did not need to. Naven said his season had always been spent underground, waiting for it to end. He said this year he understood, for the first time, that there was another way to get through the dark. Then everyone looked at Ro. Ro sat with his hands folded. He took a breath. "I learned," he said slowly, "that why is not always the right first question." He paused. Sometimes the right question is simply, "Will you show me?" The room stayed quiet for a long moment after that. Lola broke it by announcing that Fess had brought real food and everyone should eat before it got cold. The room moved and filled with sound and the particular warmth of people who had arrived as strangers and were leaving as something else. The food was shared. The ocean sound played twice more. Benny sat beside Oris and drew quietly, and Oris watched over his shoulder with his secondary membranes doing that thing again. At the end of the night, when the younger children were already asleep in a pile near the tree and the older ones were fading, Lola tugged on Rose's sleeve. "What happens to the tree after we leave?" she asked. Rose said, "It will be removed. Station Biological Waste Protocol." Lola looked at the tree. "You should water it until it can't go anymore. It is already cut from the root. It cannot survive." Lola looked at him with the plain patience of someone who had explained something important before and would explain it again as many times as it took. "It doesn't know that yet," she said. Ro looked at the tree for a long time. "I will water it," he said. Lola nodded, satisfied, and went to sleep. The transport was ready at 0800. The station was quieter than usual that morning, the way places go quiet when something is about to leave them. The children packed their small pouches. Some of them had more than they arrived with. A piece of wire mesh, a folded note, a small food packet with a Scythian symbol drawn on the outside that meant, as Sewell translated it, safe traveling. Nina packed last. She stood for a moment in the empty temporary quarters and looked at the four walls. She had slept in worse places. She had slept in places that felt like nothing at all. This room, which was gray alloy and too cold and had no window, had somehow felt different. She thought about why. She decided it was because the tree was 40 meters down the corridor and the smell had reached her even here. She picked up her pouch and went to say goodbye. The corridor to the docking bay passed through the communal hall. Dara had not planned it that way, but she was glad for it. The alien crew was there. All of them, standing in the hall and the corridor outside it, along the walls, quietly present. Nobody had announced this. Nobody had organized a lineup. They had simply shown up. Oris was first. He crouched in front of Benny and signed 3 words. He had learned them overnight. Benny's eyes went wide. Then Benny signed back, slow and deliberate for words. It was the first time in 3 years he had communicated with anyone outside the small circle of children he trusted. Oris stood up straight and kept his face still, but the secondary membranes were doing the thing again. Fess pressed a small wrapped package into Lola's hands and said it was for the journey. Lola opened it immediately and found 2 small cakes and a folded note with a drawing on it. The drawing was of Lola. Fess had tried to capture her expression, the chin-up, fearless look she wore at all times. It had gotten it exactly right. Brass shook hands with each child formally, which was a human gesture he had looked up the night before. The young Scythian worker held out its terrible, crumpled paper ornament, unfolded now, and gave it to Lola. "For the next tree," it said. Lola took it with both hands. Dara found Director Navin waiting near the bay entrance. He held a folded document. Station letterhead, official seals from 3 different departments, and signatures down the margin in 4 different scripts. "This is a letter of cultural significance," Navin said, and handed it to Nina. "It formally records the event in Velothai in Auric Diplomatic Archives. What occurred here this week is designated as a recognized cultural exchange of the First Order." He paused. It was co-authored by Ro. Nina unfolded it slowly. She read it. Her lips moved on one line, near the bottom. She read it again. Then her eyes filled. Ro stepped forward from where he had been standing near the wall. "Do not be distressed," he said. "It is a high honor." "I know," Nina said. "That is why." Ro looked at her for a moment. He did not ask her to explain. He understood. Colt was last in line before the bay. Dara crouched in front of him. "I made a call this morning," she said. The family on the colony world was informed of the delay. They extended their consideration window. She looked at him steadily. "They said to tell you they are still waiting." Colt looked at her. Then he looked at the floor. Then he put his arms around her neck and held on tight and said nothing at all. Dara held him back just as tight. The children boarded. The bay doors closed. The transport disengaged from the dock with a low mechanical hum and moved away from the station into the dark. The communal hall was very still. Ro walked to the tree. He picked up the small cup of water that Lola had placed at the base that morning before leaving. She had done it without saying anything, just filled it from the mess hall tap and set it down carefully. And he looked at it for a moment. Then he went and refilled it and set it back. He watered the tree every morning after that. The needles began to drop after the first week. By the second week, the branches were thinning. By the third, most of the ornaments had been carefully moved to a shelf on the wall so they would not fall. The tree grew thinner and paler and more fragile. Ro kept watering it. On the 31st day, the last needle fell. Ro stood there and looked at the bare brown branches for a while. Then he filed a formal supply request. 1 pine tree, live-rooted if possible, for delivery before December of the following year. Reason given: ongoing cultural study, annual recurrence expected. Sewell co-signed it. Then Oris. Then Naven. 6 months later, a new crew rotation passed through Varys 9. A young Auric officer doing her first deep station posting stepped into the communal hall and saw the ring of dried pine needles still on the floor where no one had swept them. She asked Oris, passing by with a crate, what they were from. He stopped. He looked at the ring on the floor for a moment. A tree, he said. It stood here. It mattered. He kept walking. The young officer stood there a moment, looking at the small, dry circle. Then she moved on, but she looked back once.